Lessons for South Africa on land expropriation without compensation. Now what we're going to emphasize, we've read the fears. There will be no food security if land is taken. The economy won't grow if land is taken. In this house today, we're going to demystify those falsehoods and say you can implement the land reform program leading to improved food security, leading to economic growth. So what are the lessons for South Africa on land expropriation without compensation? And how can we do it in such a manner that actually our food security is improved? Actually, our economy grows in a manner that is inclusive, in a manner that is sustainable. Let's talk about the basics. You know, I want to disabuse you of this idea of land reform. It's not land reform, it's land revolution. Understand it as a land revolution. If you do that, then some of the issues become clearer. Revolutions, by definition, are not constitutional. Revolutions overturn systems. Revolutions are bloody. The American Revolution in 1776 was bloody. The Russian Revolution in 1917 was bloody. The French Revolution in 1789 was not constitutional. So first and foremost, remove the confusion, remove the illusion of a constitutional land reform program. It's a land revolution. So the constitution doesn't matter when it comes to land revolution. It must be changed to align it with what we want. So please, that is the foundational understanding I want you to have. It's about land revolution. And revolutions, by definition, do not obey laws. They are not constitutional, they overturn systems. That's the first thing you must bear in mind. So which means Section 25 must go. We shouldn't be worried about it. We must start with what we want. Okay? So land revolution, land use, a broader perspective, let's understand that. Then the lessons about land reform, about the politics of expropriation, about food security, about economic growth. And then we'll talk about the requisite environment in which we should do land reform. Then we have some concluding remarks. So what are we saying? What we want in South Africa is shared economic prosperity. What we want in South Africa is inclusive economic growth. To achieve that, there are three pillars we must pursue: land expropriation, effective land use, and then a shared national vision, a shared brand for South Africa. Those are the pillars we must put in place to achieve shared economic prosperity, to achieve inclusive economic growth. So as we do this discussion today, remember the framework of our discussion on land expropriation. Okay? So as I've already indicated, land reform is not the issue, but rather a land revolution. So of course, Section 25 of the South African Constitution must be removed. The starting point is not to look at the Constitution. Ask yourself, as South Africans, what do we want as South Africans? What is equitable in South Africa? What is just in South Africa? What is fair in South Africa? What is the history in South Africa in terms of land? These fundamental questions will give you the strategy and the solution. And then you shape the Constitution to fit what you want. Because we are talking about a revolution. So we don't start with saying, what does the Constitution say? No, we disregard the Constitution and ask ourselves, what do we want? What is just? What is the history? What is fair? And then having gotten the answer from that discussion, then we say, okay, which part of the Constitution do we take out to fit what we want? And also, when we say land, don't just think agriculture. Africans, black Africans, are hungry for land to build their houses on, are hungry for land to build their schools. They're hungry for land for commercial purposes. So we must have a broader understanding of the meaning of land. Yes, land for agriculture. Yes, to land for housing as well. Land for businesses. Land for commercial uses. So we need a broader understanding of land. Because normally we always think about agriculture. No, the African wants land for industry. The African wants land for agriculture. The African wants land for housing. Land for cultural purposes. To bury our people. For social purposes, for spiritual purposes. So when the African says, let us take land back, there's a broader perspective. There's a broader use that land will be put to. There's land hunger in all those areas. So not just agriculture, but land for social purposes, land for cultural purposes, land for spiritual purposes, and land for commerce. Okay? Now, from the discussions that have gone on in South Africa, the major stumbling block has been Section 25 of the Constitution. There was a joint Constitutional Review Committee which went around the country and had a national debate and national consultations. And the overwhelming results were that Section 25 must be amended so that we can have expropriation of land without compensation. The key political players supporting were the ANC, EFF, and UDM. And the IFP, COP, DA, and Freedom Front Plus were a bit in disagreement. They didn't like this idea of land expropriation without compensation. On the 4th of December, the National Assembly has accepted and approved the process to amend Section 25. And then 13 March 2019, the MPs, the Parliament also agreed to do the work, but they said we'll do it after the elections. Now the elections have come and gone. We hope that Section 25 is going to be removed and we're going to move on towards the appropriation of land without compensation. So let's make sure that this happens. But actually, you know, before we even think about this, some people are worried, oh no, why are we changing the Constitution? We need compensation and all that. You know, let me throw you a curveball and actually say that this is a major compromise. This discussion is a misnomer. This discussion is problematic. When we say land expropriation without compensation, what are you talking about? South Africa? What are you talking about, Africans, when you say land expropriation without compensation? This debate has a problem. There's a wrong assumption. Who should be compensated? When you talk about this, who should be compensated? The thinking is that, maybe the white commercial farmer must be compensated. Are you sure about that? Others will argue the reverse. Who should be compensated, the black African or the white farmer? Here is a curveball to jog your memory, to make sure that you understand that what we're doing in South Africa is actually compromised in the national interest. Number one, land must be taken away from the white farmer. The white farmer must pay compensation for using the land without paying for it. So the compensation we should be talking about is not about compensating the white farmer, but rather compensating the black person whose land was taken and used without compensation. And I can tell you that's not the conversation in the country. The conversation is, okay, you're going to take land away from the white farmer, you must compensate the white farmer. And we are saying, actually, wrong assumption. The compensation is the other way around. You take away the land from the white farmer, the very same white farmer pays compensation for using the farm without paying for it. So for those who are opposing what is being done in the country, now you understand that it could be worse because there's a different interpretation. There's a stronger interpretation that says land must be taken, The white farmer must pay compensation, and compensation, no compensation at all to white farmer. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that you understand it's not as simple as it looks. It could be rougher. So for the DA, for the IFP, for Freedom Front Plus, you must embrace what's coming out of this parliament, because it could be worse. The African could ask for both the land and compensation. Just bear that in mind. Right, what are the lessons in this game of taking land? You know, I'm coming from Zimbabwe, where land has been taken. There's a problem that you must watch out for as South Africans. Land expropriation is a good idea. Taking land and giving it to the majority of the people is a good idea, but it might be abused by political elites who actually take a good idea and use it as a political tool. They know that there's hunger for land, they know the historical injustices, and they know the value of the agenda. So they talk the talk. They go around speaking about land expropriation to get votes. Land expropriation to get ahead in the political market without commitment to the idea. So number one lesson is, don't allow a good idea to be used by political elites for their self-interest. They will talk about it because it's a popular cause. They will talk about it because there's historical basis for it, but they have no commitment to it. South Africa, I hope, will be different, because at least you've got two political parties which are very strong on the subject, which is the ANC and the DA. But even those two, sorry, the ANC and EFF. But even those two, we must watch that they actually mean what they say. They're not using land expropriation as a strategy to get votes. Secondly, once the land is taken, the land must be distributed or given out in a non-partisan manner. The danger is, if you're not careful, the ANC will take the land and give their friends, give the political elites, give their wives and husbands, give their friends, give their powerful elites, at the expense of the women, at the expense of the young people, at the expense of the workers and the unemployed. Land revolution must benefit the majority. The workers, the students, the rural people, the women, and the young people. So, a good idea can be abused by the elites, and they take the land and they give themselves. That's not a good revolution. That's not good expropriation of land. That's one lesson we're getting from Zimbabwe, that don't allow the political elites to seize the land and give themselves. Focus must be on the poor. Focus must be on the unemployed. Focus must be on the young people. Focus must be on women, rural folks, and workers. Take the land, but give it to those who deserve it, not to give yourselves. It's not enough to take land and give people. You must provide resources required for resettlement. You must provide skills required for resettlement. If it's agriculture, skills for agriculture. If it's agriculture, skills and resources for agriculture. Otherwise, you end up with land being a status symbol. I own a farm. I own 50 hectares of land. I own 500, and there's no productivity, there's no industry, there's nothing going on the land. That's a major lesson from across the border in Zimbabwe. Many people have land as a status symbol. Many people have land and they have no capacity to work on the land. There are no industries on the land. There are no houses on the land. Land is just a possession without activity. So we must think about the resources required for land reform or land revolution and the resources required for resettlement. Land acquisition, land expropriation must be linked to land use. These are the lessons we have for South Africa. productivity and production on the land. Use of science and technology to make the land productive. Use of science and technology to drive up productivity and use per hectare. Mobile phones, internet, renewable energy, biotechnology, high yield seeds, high yield fertilizers, cell phones to get markets, cell phone to get information about agriculture. The application of science and technology in agriculture to boost and drive productivity, to boost and drive use per hectare. That's what must be done together with expropriation of land without compensation. High use seeds, fertilizers, market information, market access, weather information, agriculture, knowledge, best practice, and so on. All these things can be done using technology. So let us make sure that we are able to sweat the land, to make the land productive. The fourth industrial revolution. What can we do as South Africa to use elements of the fourth industrial revolution to drive productivity in agriculture, to drive usage of land effectively? Artificial intelligence, intelligent algorithms, big data, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, drones, renewable energy, energy storage, robotics and mechatronics, cloud computing, blockchain technologies. You must be creative as young people and say, what elements of the fourth industrial revolution can we deploy to increase productivity on the land that we've taken without compensation? Then we're going to have a successful revolution on the land. That's what has to be done different. These are the lessons. In Zimbabwe, the land was not effectively used. In Zimbabwe, the land was not linked to technology. There was no application of the fourth industrial revolution in land use. South Africa must be different. South Africa must do this. Some people say, don't you think cloud computing, drones, renewable energy are too advanced for South Africa? We don't even have ESCOM. We don't have power. You know, if we are clever, if we are creative, some of the most advanced technologies can be cheaper to use, easier to apply, and more effective in our environment. Our poverty, our lack of development can be an opportunity to deploy high science. A good example is EcoCash and Mupesa. 4 or 5 years ago, 80% of our people were not banked. 70% of the Africans had no access to physical telephony. So with the advent of mobile telephony, an opportunity was created where people came in and provided mobile phones so Africans can talk to each other. Provided mobile phones so Africans can bank on the phone. Right now as we speak, Mupesa and EcoCash are global best practice. There's nothing in Japan, there's nothing in America, there's nothing in Europe that is as good as Mupesa and EcoCash. These are examples of how you can leapfrog from poverty to stardom, from poverty to the fourth industrial revolution. So, if we think creatively, if we are entrepreneurial in our approach, we should be able to use some of this high science to drive our economies, in particular agriculture. In particular, the land we have taken without compensation can be made productive by creative usage of the fourth industrial revolution. Yes, we can. Yes, we can leapfrog, jumping older technologies by deploying high science. In this case, we're talking about land. We're talking about agriculture. Okay? When we do that, then we can destroy the myth that says, if you take away land from white farmers, you're going to starve. If you take away land from white farmers, there will be no food security. The economy will stagnate. If you do what I've just said, there will be no stagnation of the economy. In fact, the economy will grow. There will be food security. the African farmer, the black African farmer, when given the land, and we apply science, and we provide skills and resources, will be able to feed themselves, feed South Africa, feed the region, feed Africa, and feed the world. Empowered, resourced, and productive black farmers can feed the country, can feed South Africa. With resources and skills, as discussed, food security is guaranteed. In fact, production will go up, productivity will go up, use per hectare will go up. In any case, most of the white-owned farms or land is lying fallow and underutilized. Some of the land is owned by non-resident landowners who are in Europe. They own land here or they don't even use the land. So it's a myth to say land expropriation without compensation will lead to starvation or lack of food security. Some of the land is not even performing, it's just owned. So it is possible for the empowered black farmer to feed himself, herself, the country, and the world. And in any case, the African also has an argument here. There should be no expectation that every land given to blacks goes to agriculture. Somebody will argue, what, if you give me my land, why can't I just get my land and sit on it and look at it? It's my land. If the land was taken away from the black African during colonization and all that, the black woman, the black man can also take their land and just sit on it and look at it and admire it. It's their right. So don't be presumptuous and say to every African, if we give you land, are you going to produce? If we give you land, are you going to be a good farmer? No. I can also get my land, sit on it, look at it, and use it for spiritual purposes. So I can pray to my ancestors sitting on my land. That should be acceptable at Rhodes University, in Grahamstown. I sit on my land and pray to my ancestors on my land and just look on it and sit. Anyway, we're emphasizing that land is bigger than agriculture. Land is spiritual, land is social, land is life. So in addition to agriculture, there is use for land in terms of culture, in terms of history. White South Africans should not be telling blacks what to do with their land. Just give me my land and get out of my way. That's the lesson. So what are we saying? Land expropriation without compensation, done correctly, will increase food security. Done correctly, will lead to economic growth. The land will be used for commerce, the land will be used for housing, the land will be used for industries, the land will be used for agriculture. If it is used effectively, land expropriation without compensation can lead to food security, can lead to economic growth in South Africa. That must always bear at the back of our minds. Those are the lessons we have for South Africa. Okay, you can't carry out land reform in a vacuum. You can't carry out land expropriation without a context. South Africa must address the bigger picture issues, like shared national vision, like shared brand, like proper broad-based black economic empowerment, formulation and execution, like shared economic prosperity and economic growth. These are the frameworks in which we should do our land reform program. Are we structured for shared economic prosperity? Are we structured for inclusive economic growth? Are we structured for broad-based black economic empowerment? Are we executing it properly? And the economy to be in 2040. And the answer must be a shared answer between business, academy, civil society, and the political parties. We don't have that. the shared national vision. Once you have a picture of the vision, then you say, what is my game plan? How am I going to move from the bottom of the valley where I am to the house on the top of the hill? That's your strategy, your game plan. Once you got the game plan done, then you go to execution, execution, execution. We need a framework like this in South Africa, where this is shared by everybody. The academy, civic society, industry, political parties, everybody must say, that's our South African vision. We don't have that in South Africa. It must be achieved if our land expropriation is going to be successful. And then once we have our vision, we have our strategy, and then our implementation matrix. The brand. What do we mean by brand? What is our national identity in South Africa? What is our competitive identity? Who are we? What are we known for? It's called the hexagon of branding. 6 items: trade, investment, tourism, people, governance, culture. And again, this must be shared. DA, EFF, Freedom Front Plus, IFP, ANC, they must have the same answers. So Brand South Africa is not good enough. We have, it's an ANC program. That's not national, Brand South Africa. It's not shared. We want a shared brand definition so we can unlock economic value. What do we want to be known for in South Africa? How do we unlock economic value from what we're known for? In the hexagon of branding. So there should be no debate about our identity as South Africans. We must be the same. The way we want our investment, our trade, our people, our culture, our governance, they must all be shared. Okay? And then of course we attract investment into the economy. What is the brand question? To develop a nation's reputation in order to improve the country's global competitiveness. That is the objective. That is the agenda of nation branding. To develop the nation's reputation in order to improve the country's global competitiveness. That's the question we must address as South Africans. So we can establish a competitive identity for the country. South Africa, the brand. Nigeria, the brand. Kenya, the brand. Zimbabwe, the brand. So let us establish our brand as South Africa so that our land expropriation without compensation is successful. There must be buy-in and ownership into the vision and the brand. The generality of the people of South Africa must buy into the brand, buy into the vision. All political parties must buy into the brand. The business community buy into the brand. Civil society, academia, media, everybody must be a brand ambassador for South Africa. NDP, sorry Cyril, not good enough. It's a partisan program, very mediocre. ANC, very mediocre. We want a national vision that involves DA, IFP, EFF, everybody. This is mediocre. Sorry, you don't pass, 0. Rest of Africa, again, this is not good enough. Highly free, not good. So what are we saying? We are saying that land expropriation without compensation must proceed. But don't have any illusion about a piece of paper called the Constitution. Land expropriation is a revolution. And revolutions don't obey constitutions. The Constitution must not be a barrier to what we want to do. We need a strategic approach to the politics of expropriation. Don't take land and give your husbands, give your boyfriends, give your girlfriends. No. The land must go to the women, to the rural people, to the poor, to the young people, to the unemployed, to the workers. Don't allow a good idea to be abused by the political elites to get votes and to enrich themselves. Yes, if we empower the new farmer. Yes, if we use science and technology. Yes, if we use the fourth industrial revolution, we can boost and drive food security. We can grow the economy. We can get economic growth through land expropriation without compensation. However, all these things must be done within the context of the fourth industrial revolution, must be done within the context of a shared national vision, a shared national brand. So all these are drivers. The shared national vision, the fourth industrial revolution are key enablers that will make us successful as we pursue the fourth industrial revolution, and also as we pursue the ideas of land expropriation without compensation. As I conclude, let me emphasize this. As South Africans, as Black South Africans, West South Africans, and South Africans in general, please care about the success of your country. Care about the success of the poorest. Care about the success of the generality of the South African population. The fact that the Gini coefficient is the worst in the world should affect you, because you never be respected as a South African until South Africa has done well as a country. Your personal brand is a function of the national brand. You must make sure that as you succeed as an individual, you go up with your communities. You go up with the rest of the country. Remember, we're Africans. Ubuntu. I am because we are. We are because I am. A person is a person because of other people. Other people are respected because of the circumstances of the individual. Ubuntu. I am because we are. We are because I am. I thank you so very much for this opportunity. No, but you see, if we have freedom, you know, these blacks can run countries, they're inefficient, so we will remove our investment. We should never worry and compromise on justice. They must accept us on our terms. If you feel that when we take land and empower the African, that will endanger your investment, keep your investment. Remember, investment is not charity. They're investing to make money. Right? Do you know, if you talk about empowerment, in India, for example, as an international company, you can't come and own more than 40% of your business. You actually have to sell to all locals, and also even your name. If your name is Coca-Cola, you must have an Indian part of the name. But they're all over there in India. But when Africans try to empower themselves, they're always threatened, if you do that, it's not good for business, we'll withdraw investments, we'll do this and the other. The Chinese, in the hybrid car systems, and they're also pushing empowerment. We must understand that when we have investors coming into South Africa, into Nigeria, into Africa, they're not doing us a favor. It's economics. And so, we must do what is right by ourselves. That's why I say start with what you want. What do you want in South Africa? What is just? What is fair? What is history telling us? Then we come up with our solutions. We say to the investor, take it or leave it. And they'll take it. So please, let us be bold. And if we're strong, we do all these I talked about, our economy is strong, they will come and invest on our terms. Yeah? Because I know very what you're talking about. I think when we talked about Trump said, yeah, we'll fix you, don't touch the land. You know? And Trump of all people. Anyway. So anyway, my answer is let us be bold, let us do what is right, what is good for our economy, and people must take us on our terms. They will come and trade with us, not out of charity, but out of economics. And then at some point they opened up. Singapore, India, they protect their industries. When they're strong enough, they compete. Over here, they say, don't protect free markets. So the African is not supposed to protect their industries. And then they themselves do practice protectionism, which is called strategic protectionism, so that they can nest their industries and then open up when you are ready. So sometimes we're saying here, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so we must do what is right for ourselves. and also historically, and also, talk about the Americans. You know, the history of Mandela. You know, when Mandela was arrested, how was he arrested? You know, when Mandela was arrested, the CIA was the ones who had information about his whereabouts, and he gave it to South Africans. So the capturing of Mandela in South Africa was with the aid of the CIA, number one. Number two, the Americans, they put Mandela on the terrorist list, the ANC on the terrorist list, right? So they never supported the liberation struggle. They supported apartheid. They said constructive engagement. To the extent that Tokyo up to now is still on the list. And Mandela was on the list until he was no longer president. So when you look at America and their views about us, we must always remember they were never on the side of the African from the beginning. Now they love Mandela, they love South Africa after 1994. But where is the history? The history is the history of supporting apartheid against black South Africans. So yes to the investor, but the investor must come on our terms. We must be unapologetic about what we think is right. As long as we believe it's right, everyone else can buzz off. Okay, third question. Able to structure an arrangement where the traditional white farmer transfers skills to the black farmer, more power to that arrangement. We want skills to get to the farmer who is new. And so what we want are resources and skills for the new farmer. By the way, a counter example, in Zimbabwe, where in some areas the smallholder farmer has been empowered, they're doing the production, they're producing tobacco, they're producing maize, they're feeding the nation in some aspects. So when it's done, when they're empowered in terms of resources, when they're empowered in terms of skills, they can do it. There are actually studies out there of successful farms or smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe that have done very well, but the larger scale or the larger picture is negative. But there are examples of when we do the right thing about skills, about resources, we can drive productivity. So, and we're not going to wait for skills before taking the land, by the way. But that's what becomes the catch-22. You are not ready for freedom. you can't do yourself. We'd rather live through ourselves. So we're not going to wait for the skills. The land will come fast, now, yesterday. And then we work on the skills. Because they can always be a trick. Oh, no, let's make sure you are ready. Let's prepare you. Then we'll give the land first. And then, so anyway, we should not doubt ourselves. If we get the resources means money, equipment, all those things. And then skills mean the know-how. If we get the know-how, get the resources, as African black farmers, they can produce, we can produce and feed ourselves. The evidence is there. The problem is, as I've indicated, we've not done that. We've just given land and no follow-through on skills. We've given land to ourselves. Political elites, we have no time to farm. Farming is a business. You can't do cell phone farming where you're in town and phoning someone to work on your land. You must be there on the land as a farmer. So we have not done it right because we have not committed ourselves to land. We have not given the skills and the resources. But you are very correct. Without the skills, without the resources, there could be a problem. But that's why I emphasize that I went all over the place to talk about technology, to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, to make sure that land comes with skills, land comes with resources. But the smallholder farmer can perform better than the large-scale farmers. There's evidence for that. The smallholder farmer can be more productive. But you are very correct. We must be systematic and structured in terms of making sure the land comes with skills and resources, but in a manner that is sustainable, because we can't be spoon-fed, it's a business, and the business must sustain itself. What we are simply saying is, remember, it's about history, the history of the land. The land was taken by force without payment. As part of restitution, as part of liberation. Remember, 1994 was about political independence, not economic independence. 1980 in Zimbabwe was political and not economic. 1957 in Ghana was political. And the joke is, in 1994, they gave you the crown and kept the jewels. You're now the king or the queen, but the crown is empty. South Africa in 1994 gained political independence, political freedom, not economic freedom, not economic emancipation. That's why the Gini coefficient is the worst in the world. So 1994 was empty in terms of economics. Sorry, Mandela, you gave us a crown with all the jewels. I mean, but that was his role. You and I have to get the economy going. So, talk economics, but also remember justice issues, the liberation issues. To say land must come, and that's why I'm saying land is not just for agriculture. It's land to build your house. People don't have places to build their houses. Land to bury your people. Spiritual value for land. Land for commerce. Land to build schools. So, yes to large-scale farms, yes to commercial farms, yes to smallholder farms, but they can be owned by black people as well as white people. Number one, we agree. That's why I said, if we can make out a creative manner of transferring skills from this block, that block, the media. So let's be creative about that. Right. So there's no harm done. In fact, the more the merrier of such an arrangement. However, I think you didn't, compensation, I gave you a counter argument. That compensation is the other way around. So we should not even discuss compensation because the compensation that makes sense is the other way around. Where the black person gets a farm plus compensation. I know you find that too radical, right? Yeah. But I'm saying, but anyway, look, you must understand history. A page of history is worth 10 volumes of logic. So the whole argument about compensation is wrongly stated. But I agree with you, if we can, and we should be able to, in a creative manner, to work together as South Africans and get the skills to move from one end to the other in a sustainable manner. But the compensation issue, I would rather not delve into that because, as I've argued, some people feel very strongly that the black woman must get a farm plus compensation for all the work and profits which were generated by their farm without payment. So compensation is actually the other way, not the way you are thinking. But anyway, I'm sure we'll solve that in a nice one. Give me more PDS. Yeah. If there's to be any compensation, you could look at that and see what is the value of those improvements. And then what is the value of the profits that are generated from the land from 1652. Right? And you can see that if you look at the profits generated, that might outweigh the value of the physical asset on the land. Resistance. I think this is where you have to deal with it as a country. Once you decide that you're going to do land expropriation without compensation, which means you make your constitution support that. Now the constitution will be following that. So if someone resists, then they're fighting against the law. They're going against the constitution of the country. Okay? And sanctions. I don't know who's going to put sanctions on South Africa. I think several Africans are just too careful, too scared. Why are you worried that there will be sanctions against South Africa from the UN? Because you've got freedom. Now that you've solved your issues of social justice, and then there'll be sanctions from the UN and sanctions from the British and so on. I think what we need, as I said at the beginning, to be bold, decisive, fair, and just about the situation in your own country, and not worry about external forces. And I don't see how someone can put sanctions on South Africa for running their country the way they want to run their country. I don't see that making sense. And who is the UN? I think the UN is us. The UN is Africans, right? So I don't see why we should be worried about that. But in terms of the issue of working together, I think it's important to work together and unlock value and unlock skills, but resistance cannot make sense once the law is clear. And if you break the law, then the law will take its course. But let's move away from my excuses. I would want us to spend more time on how we can use technology to make our land productive. How we can drive use per hectare using science, using high-yield seeds, fertilizers, how to use mobile phones to get markets and so on, how to be productive. I think will be more interesting for me, so that the land is used effectively. The reason why the South, the global South, is poor and the rich north is rich, the global north, is because their assets are liquid, their assets are leverageable. Whereas the assets belonging to poor people in the south are dead capital. You must pursue that thesis of dead capital. What is he saying? If you think about it, most of the land we have in the rural areas is no title. Most of our houses in the areas have no title. Most of our businesses have no title. Whereas in the rich London, Joburg, Sandton, New York, every piece of land has title. Every house has a title. Large-scale farms have title. So you can go to the bank and borrow against your house in Sandton. Go and borrow against your farm. Whereas when you are poor, with your beautiful house in the rural areas, it's worth zero because it's not registered. So you can't go and borrow and do a business. So I want to emphasize one fundamental point, which is the issue of legal infrastructure for property and property rights. Most of our poor people don't have title for their assets, so they can't borrow against them and start businesses. Whereas the rich have title, they can borrow against their land, borrow against their houses, and perform businesses. So you're very correct. What we need to do is we take the land without compensation. The recipients of that land must also have title, so they can borrow against the land to start a business. Not just agriculture. If you have a farm valued at 20 million rands, okay, just the value of the farm under your name, you can go to the bank and borrow 10 million against the 20 million, start a business and prosper. So in addition to taking land, it's important that we understand that land is wealth. Land has value. The collateral value of land must be maintained in this transformation. More so, we must say the assets, the house that the rural person has must also have title so they can borrow against it. So, very important point, the collateral value of land must be respected in this transaction so the African or the new owner can borrow against the land. I'm going to emphasize this. It's saying that, for example, in rural South Africa, rural Zimbabwe, the rural people are staying on that land, they don't own it, they just stay there. Whereas if you have a farm, a large-scale farm, you actually have a title to the land. So what we are saying is, if we forget the land reform and land revolution, currently as it stands, we want the rural people in South Africa, the rural people in Zimbabwe, to own the land they're sitting on, so that it's registered. Because you know, with affluence, you can have someone who grew up in the rural areas, who make a little bit of money, they go and build a beautiful house in the rural areas, just as good as the house in Sandton. The difference is, the house in Sandton is worth 3 million rands, and you can go and borrow against it. The same house, stationed in the rural areas, is worth zero, because it's not registered. So you can't borrow against it. So I'm trying to discuss a problem which is independent of land reform. So that must be addressed so that asset A, which is as good as asset B, both of them are liquid and you can borrow against them. The way the infrastructure, legal infrastructure for poor people is structured at the moment is that most of their businesses, most of their land, most of their houses are not registered. There's no legal instrument, and so you can't borrow against it. So let's put that aside and address the issues you have raised. So we need to fix that even outside the land reform, land revolution. Section 25 and 26, those are the details that must be addressed by the lawyers. But what I'm saying is, whatever that document says, whatever that beautiful piece of paper, it must never affect our program. Whatever the damn Constitution says doesn't matter. What matters is what is right. And we're asking what is right. That's grapple with that. What is just? Grapple with it. Forget the paper. When you sit down as South Africans and you agree on what is fair, what is just, what does history teaches us, what happened, and then you come up with a solution and you fix the paper. Never refer to the paper. The paper was created by people. And a revolution does not affect the paper. So I don't have answers to the issues you're raising. I would want you to work as an ecosystem, as a country, and say, okay, where do you start? Do you go back to 1652? Or what happens if the actual person who took the land without paying actually then sold it, and the kind of person actually paid money? What do you do about that? Those are details you can work out, and I don't have quick answers for that. But all I encourage is that there must be no barrier, there must be no constraint put on our plan or solutions by a paper called a constitution. But we must be able to address that. Who is black? Khoisan, Indian, and so on. Again, you got to sit down and agree and define yourself as a people, what you want. But what we don't want is to have inertia and these arguments of who is black to be used as an excuse not to get land back. Because we know who wasn't voting, we know who was a victim of apartheid, we know the history of apartheid, we know the history of slavery, we know the history of colonialism. So yes, to addressing the details, but there should be no retreat, no surrender in terms of getting land. I'm a strong believer in respect for the Constitution. What you must understand is, I'm pushing a finer point where I'm saying the Constitution must not be a constraint. Don't use it as an excuse when you're addressing a fundamental issue. 1994 itself was not legal. It was not legal to free South Africa. Well, how was it legal? Mandela spent 27 years in jail, fighting for the same freedom. The armed struggle, the MK fighters, Abla fighters were not legal soldiers. They were illegal because they were overturning a system. So I'm dramatizing the fact that when you are carrying out a fundamental change, like 1776, where the British monarch was oppressing the white colonies, and they revolted in 1776 to become free. That activity in 1776 could not have been constitutional because it was creating a new order. In 1957, the independence of Ghana, the activities leading to it were not necessarily constitutional according to the old order. The same applies to Zanda and Zebra fighters who were fighting in Zimbabwe. They were not constitutional. They were overturning a system. But once you have come up with your constitution is agreed after the revolution, like right now, they're making a constitution. That is their document. They put it together after 1776. But everything obtaining in America before 1776 was not supposed to be respected. Now, coming to South Africa, you are saying the document is working. It's not working if it is putting constraints on land. 1994 was a compromise. Remember, I said it gave us political independence, but no economic emancipation. We remained economic slaves in South Africa. So when we want to be free from being economic slaves, no law should stop us. But however, don't get me wrong, when you and I have come up with their constitution, which is just, we must respect it. But before it is just, don't respect it, because it makes me a slave. I don't want that constitution. But however, governance is, you're very correct, governance is important, constitutionalism is important, but only after we've created a state that is just. And so, and I don't want you to go away thinking I have no respect for a constitution. The problem is I don't want the constitution to stop us from addressing historical injustice. In other words, when we say land in South Africa, don't go to the constitution. Go to yourselves and say, what is just, what is fair, what we learn from history, this is our answer. Then we say, our answer, how does it deal with the constitution? Change the constitution. That's what I'm saying. But it's a fine line, because then the brand now is governance and constitutionalism that are important. So I hope you get that final point. By the way, Zimbabwe was not about breaking the constitution. It was just criminal conduct where land was given to elites. It was not just by taking the land by force. They did more than that. They took the land by force and they gave themselves. So, and there were no resources, there were no skills. So, let's not conflate the Zimbabwean problem with South Africa's problem. That's why we're saying lessons. So we're saying in South Africa, if you are going to call us on breaking the constitution, that's okay. That's what we're saying. Taking without compensation is right. What's wrong is to give yourselves and not give the people. What's wrong is not to provide resources and skills for. What's wrong is not to use science and technology. So the lessons are about what to do with the land. So if you have a sellout agreement as a basis, how do you move forward? So that's a very good point, because we are starting from a very problematic starting point, which is the 1994 agreement. And that's why some people have gone as far as saying it might have been necessary, but it was a sellout arrangement. And how do we correct the agreement that we assigned to as South Africa? So maybe we have to do another codex and go back to fundamentals. But because you can't have an agreement in 1994 that says yes to political freedom, but you remain an economic slave. That's what was done in 1994. We got the crown and the jewels were kept elsewhere. We got the political independence, we were denied the economic freedom. That's why the Gini coefficient is the worst in the world. So I would say it's a challenge, but we must agree that we must not be constrained by a fraudulent basis from addressing what is fundamentally a national question of freedom and land. But the problem was of resources and skills. So that the little land, some land given to the poor people, there was no empowering of the new farmers for them to be productive. So that is the problem with the land which was given to the poor people, that they were not empowered to be productive. Now, on tenure, you are very correct. I'm not pushing one type. What I want to emphasize is that we must be creative in the way we define title, not just private title, but title in general. What is important to me is unlocking collateral value. If in a collectivized or communal type of title, one can still borrow against the land, then I'm fine. What I don't want is for people, for individuals to say, I have access to land, I have land, but that land is debt capital. But private title is not the only way of doing that. There could be creative ways of defining communal title or collective title, but that titling system must allow me as a peasant, must allow me as a rural woman to go and borrow against that land. What it simply means is we need to be more creative than just say private title. In Zimbabwe, the problem is even the big guys, the elites who got the land, they have this 99-year lease, which is not valuable. So they're sitting on 20,000 hectares of land, which they can't use to borrow money from the bank to do agriculture. So even the elites themselves have not empowered themselves in terms of title. So I agree that there's a danger that if you go private title, people might sell the land. That's a challenge which must be mitigated maybe by a collectivized form of title, by some conditions on the title. But when the chips are down, my bone of contention is that the land is wealth. The land must be used in addition to agriculture, to industry and housing and other uses. I must be able to use the land as collateral. And how we do it, I think we should be open to discussion. Now, again, organic agriculture is the way to go. But what I'm simply saying is, if you're going to do organic agriculture, why don't you empower the peasant or the new owners on the new methods of agriculture? If you don't want the traditional fertilizers and traditional, biotechnology fertilizers, the bottom line is that we must empower those who are on the land to be productive. And if it means we emphasize organic agriculture, or what's called farming God's way, whatever it is, all I want to see is productivity. All I want to see is high yield per hectare. Whether you do it using organic fertilizers or inorganic fertilizer is neither here nor there. But I think what is important is that we must achieve shared economic prosperity, we must achieve economic growth from the land through commerce, through agriculture, through housing, and other uses we put our land to. But point taken, we must make sure that as we take the land, we don't come up with a land program or a land utilization program which is counter-revolutionary and not progressive. But we must get the land first. We will discuss this after. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Yeah. I know you're economists, you believe in analysis, you believe in feasibility studies. Think about it this way. The year is 1960. You have Mandela, Govan Mbeki, Chris Hani, Winnie Mandela, and others. And they're talking about South Africa. They're saying, can the Boers be defeated? Let's analyze. Let's do a feasibility study. Let's do a BCG model. What will be the answer from a feasibility study analysis and a BCG book, a McKinsey analysis? The answer will be no, you can't win. This cannot be done, it's impossible. Go and become good economists, go and become good lawyers, go and become good gardeners. The Boers are too strong. So all I'm saying is, yes to analysis, yes to feasibility studies, but sometimes you have to take a plunge. And Mandela and them took a plunge. He spent 27 years in prison. Others died. And finally, in the year 1994, there was a piece of the chunk called political freedom. So the answer is we must always be prepared to sacrifice and don't do too much analysis. Jump from the pan into the fire. Take a plunge. And then you succeed. But anyway, you are already poor, you are in poverty, there's nothing to be ready for. It shows you that these issues are serious issues with history, with a lot of history, a lot of emotions. We need to sit down as South Africans and craft a future that is good for everyone. And there is a lot of history and a lot of emotions involved in this matter, but I'm sure we'll be able to do so if we take into account what I've talked about. And there's also another thing I didn't emphasize. After we get the land for agriculture and we are productive in agriculture, we must do more than agriculture. We must do value addition, where we're now beneficiating and selling refined products from agriculture, moving up the value chains of agriculture, moving up the value chains of our industry. So all these things will make our revolution, our land expropriation, a successful project. But remember, we are not addressing this agenda in a vacuum. There is history of slavery, history of colonialism, history of apartheid, but more importantly, current history of economic apartheid. So what ended in 1994 was political apartheid. South Africa right now is to a plantation where we have economic apartheid. That is the context in which we address these matters, but we must address them in a sustainable manner in the way I've articulated today. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you.